am your speaker, Shonda Brown. Thank you for choosing .T Mental Health Alliance for obtaining your CEU certificate. In order to obtain your certificate, you must click the link below and enter the 3 passcodes from this video. We will cover 5 tips for caregiver treatment fidelity. After this course, you will learn ways to increase caregiver treatment fidelity and client progress in consultation services serving adults with disabilities and mental health disorders. .T Mental Health Alliance mission is helping you succeed by working together and identifying ways to create a learning environment for change. Our objective is to educate professionals and provide resources to support caregivers supporting adults with disabilities and mental health needs. As an accredited ACE provider, .T Mental Health Alliance provides professional development workshops to assist professionals in staying on top of their game so they can make a change. Before we get started, our first code word is CAT. C-A-T. An example, I love my cat. Our objectives for today are the following. Learn how to build a rapport with caregivers, identifying their support needs and best clinical practices. Collaborate with caregivers in developing goals. 3, how to implement compassion care during service delivery to ensure consistency in treatment fidelity. 4, learn not to accuse caregivers when there is consistency and lack of treatment practices, but instead learn to reflect, redirect, and brainstorm solutions with the caregiver. And number 5, learn how to incorporate cultural differences to treatment fidelity. How would you define a caregiver? An individual who provides direct care. This could be for children, elderly individuals, or assisting people who are chronically ill. This is also involved in assisting others with activities of daily living and or medical tasks. Caregivers can be defined in 2 terms. You have informal and formal. An informal caregiver is an unpaid individual, such as a spouse, partner, family member, friend, or neighbor. Former caregivers are paid care providers, providing care at one's home or in a care setting. This could be a daycare, residential facility, or a long-term care facility. Most common adult disabilities is hearing, which is serious difficulty hearing someone. Self-care, serious difficulties in dressing or bathing. Independent living, difficulty doing errands alone. Cognition, difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. Vision, serious difficulty seeing. And mobility, difficulty walking or climbing stairs. Most common mental disorders are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior. And this can be a combination of these things. Mental disorders are associated with distress and or problems functioning in social work or family activities. Examples include depression, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, psychotic, eating disorders, substance abuse, trauma-related disorders, and mood disorders. Treatment fidelity is defined as the extent to which the data collection from the caregiver accurately reflects the target behavior from the behavior support plan. When services are recommended, the caregivers are open to the need, but there may be a lack of consistency in following through with the clinical recommendations due to external factors. And this could be taking care of their own individual needs, such as activity of daily living, medical, personal needs, maintaining the household chores, cleaning, laundry, cooking, and other things, such as taking care of the kids themselves or other family members, even work. As clinicians, we need to build a rapport and pay attention to the context within the assigned case. As a clinician, you should evaluate the following. Does the person served live alone? Do they have caregivers? If so, is it family? If it is family, which family member is providing the support? Is it the wife, daughter, son, or mother? Next is evaluating the context of the support from the caregiver's perspective. To what capacity do they provide support? Is it full-time? Is it part-time? If so, what other service providers are involved? Reason why I emphasize additional services is because they can influence a caregiver's response effort during interactions. If they have you and other people calling, based on their involvement, they may not be as receptive to phone calls. Or the caregiver could be the opposite. They could be heavily involved with all contacts from the multiple providers. I provided just some examples, but this gives you the idea about the foundation needed to help you evaluate further how you can provide support to the caregiver and what ways you can build a rapport. As clinicians, we are the experts in creating behavior change and teaching the acquired skills to the individual and the caregiver. Building a rapport helps the clinician understand the needs of the person served and the caregiver. Also helps with understanding the context within the behavior support needs. Once the context is understood, this helps with treatment planning. Once treatment planning is identified, the next step is data collection procedures. Closely monitoring the progress for baseline and implementation of the behavior change procedures. In order to ensure success, that is when a caregiver support comes into play. This is when we consider our ethics code for behavior analysts, section 2.09, involving clients and stakeholders. Involving client and stakeholders, behavior analysts make appropriate efforts to involve clients and relevant stakeholders throughout the service relationship, including selecting goals, selecting and designing assessments and behavior change interventions, and conducting continual progress monitoring. Now we will get into the 5 tips to increase caregiver treatment, fidelity, and client progress. Number 1, build a rapport. Building a rapport promotes collaboration and compassionate care and understanding not only the needs of the individual, but also the needs of the caregiver providing daily direct care. Treatment fidelity in the natural environment is much harder to accomplish than fidelity for research purposes. That's based off of Noel, 2014. For treatment fidelity to be high, there must be ongoing rapport building between the clinician and the caregiver. This can be illustrated by building a relationship by not only understanding the needs of the individual, but also the caregiver. For example, a behavior analyst built a rapport with the person served by always discussing their favorite football team, and also build a rapport with the caregiver by spending an extra 5 minutes checking in. You may want to consider time constraints in your data collection. So as opposed to focusing on them collecting data, you can utilize a behavior Likert scale during client contacts. This way, you minimize time constraints and pushing them to collect data and instead narrow down the focus on areas based on the intensity and the time the target behavior occurs. For example, let's say after every contact with the caregiver, the behavior analyst identified the following. The caregiver is the maternal aunt to the person served. The person served has a physical and cognitive disability that requires 24/7 support and lives at home with the caregiver. The caregiver is also a single parent of 2 kids, both in elementary school, and also has a toddler. No additional supports or services is provided for the person served or caregiver. When identifying time constraints, it may not be realistic to expect the caregiver to stay consistent with collecting data. To promote flexibility, you would have to ask if they feel comfortable collecting data. If they answer yes, that is awesome. We will propose they collect data one time a week when the behavior occurs, as opposed to expecting data on a consistent basis. To minimize time constraints, do not expect ABC data collection, but more specific measurements based on the intensity of the behavior, such as frequency or duration. By collaborating with the family, as opposed to telling the family what to do for data collection, will help a lot with the rapport building process, and also will increase treatment integrity because the caregiver identified a data collection procedure that accommodates them in their schedule. Rapport building can increase focus on getting to know the individual and the caregiver supports. This can be demonstrated through in-person contacts, phone calls, emails, and even text messages. During these contacts, when a person served, target behaviors are addressed and identified. As a clinician, you can track concerns as anecdotal reports. This way, you have some form of data to justify any further clinical recommendations down the road. In the case of having a caregiver who may not be interested in collecting data in the home setting, this is a great resource to track anecdotal reports, measuring the intensity of the behavior based on a behavior Likert scale. The resource on the screen became extremely helpful during the pandemic when I worked in the school setting and I had to work remotely. At that time, I had a lot of parents expressing they were overwhelmed and refused to collect the data. I expressed my frustration to a colleague who at the time was a BCBAD, about how to collect data when the parents are refusing and having challenges in the home. My colleague encouraged me to utilize a behavior Likert scale to measure the intensity of the behavior. And ta-da! I created this form. I created this so there was a formal data collection procedure to track the behaviors. And all the parents had to do was remain consistent with all the phone contacts to address the behaviors of concern. This way, throughout the school year, if any behavioral recommendations were advocated for, I had data collection to justify the need for any additional supports. When looking at this form, you have at the top of the page that reflects the data collection period. This could be a window of time, like a week or a month, based on your own discretion. You have the target behavior and definition listed at the far bottom of the form. Then you have the behavior Likert scale to measure the intensity of the target behavior. We have 1, which means no occurrence. 2, the behavior is moderate. And 3, the behavior is very severe. Next, you emphasize what setting the data collection is being tracked in. For this example, it's the home setting. For the columns, we have the target behavior, which can be the abbreviation listed from the behavior definition section and the Likert behavior rating scale. Then any additional notes that will be helpful in regards to the target behavior of concern. So for this example, we have the target behavior repeating phrases, and the abbreviation is RP. The rating scale is 1, and the notes section emphasized how the behavior periodically occurs when there are abrupt changes in the routine. This is a resource that I can share with you guys. It's only $5. If you're interested, when you submit for your CEUs, leave in the comment section that you would like a copy of the sample data sheet, and you will receive a separate invoice through QuickBooks. And we will share this with you as a Word document so you can make your necessary changes to it. Are you ready? Now it's time for our second passcode. The second passcode is MOVIE. MOVIE. For example, my favorite movie is The Wiz with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. Next, we have an example for rapport building and data collection. So we have an example. During a phone contact with the caregiver, they share anecdotal reports that the individual engaged in 3 episodes of aggressive behavior in the community. So a clinical recommendation would be during treatment development by just the informal phone contact of the caregiver sharing anecdotal reports of the physical aggression. This can contribute to baseline data if you're in the early stages of the treatment development process. Again, documenting the incident informally by phone also promotes building a rapport with the caregiver. This lets them know their voice is being heard when addressing the behavior of concerns. Now, using the same example from before on this slide, I have some further recommendations for the rapport building process. So based on the information provided above, a great follow-up contact with the caregiver would be as follows. Hey, how are things going? Last time you spoke, there were 3 episodes of aggressive behavior in the community. Have things improved? Now, we also have to keep in mind during the rapport building process, the reactivity of the individual and also others in the environment. I know this may be common sense for most clinicians, but we have to keep in mind reactivity. The caregiver may express a behavior concern, and then when you're physically present with the person served, you may not see the behavior concern right away due to reactivity. Now, best practice, remember during the initial building rapport process, during the in-person contacts, which may also be considered as an observation, the behavior concern may not be observed due to the reactivity of the practitioner being present. When this occurs, always advocate to observe the individual at least 2 to 3 more times following the initial in-person observation to minimize the reactivity during your visits. We have number 2. Collaborate with caregivers in developing goals. According to Hazler 2020, collaboration can be defined as caring partnership in which caregivers are regularly informed and involved in the decision-making process. Collaboration also promotes decision-making in the treatment planning process and allows consultants to identify the needs of the person served, also incorporating the caregiver's input. The caregivers are key resources since they provide direct care and contact with the individual on a consistent basis. Avoid jumping into rapport writing with the mindset that you know what's best. And that is quoted from Wright 2022. Collaboration promotes decision-making in the treatment planning process and allows clinicians to identify the needs of the caregivers providing direct care. And collaboration, we should promote open communication about goal setting. This will increase motivation to achieve the goals, especially as they begin to check off those goals off their list and experience progress both within themselves and the person served. So the next question is, what does collaboration look like? First, we want to make sure we follow up. Ask about things that are going on. Are there any concerns? See if they have any barriers or challenges. And also, when you follow up, focus on positive events, such as accomplishments of either the individual, the person served, or the caregiver implementing the strategies and the goals. This is very important. Do not listen, hear them. In simple terms, we want to remember there is a difference between listening and hearing someone. Based on the Merriam-Webster dictionary, hearing is defined as the process, function, or power of becoming aware of sound. Listening, on the other hand, means to hear something with thoughtful attention and to give consideration. Remember again, the caregivers are the key resource since they provide direct care and contact with the individual on a consistent basis. We also want to ask for that feedback. After they open up, be consistent with asking for feedback. This can be in the form of periodically checking in via text message, phone calls, or email. Following up, addressing some of the key concerns they mentioned, and providing them updates on where you are in the process of supporting them through it. This helps the caregiver feel empowered and reinforce the behavior of relationship building. Plus, you got to remember, no one knows the individual like the caregiver does. Own it. Whether they share something positive or negative about the treatment planning process, take accountability. That is the best advice someone gave me. Initially, I would never admit my wrongdoing. My thing is, I don't want to look bad. But in all actuality, this shows the caregivers that you are human. You will make mistakes. The key is taking accountability, providing a solution, and being open to collaborate to ensure the mistake doesn't happen again. Remember, you never lose. You either win or you learn in all situations. Always have a solution to the problem. The worst thing anyone wants to hear when they need a solution is, I don't know. Realistically, you may not always know the answer, but you can show collaboration and sincerity by finding the answer. If I do not know the answer, a good response I typically give is, first, I recite the problem back to the person, just so I can gain clarity on some of their concerns. And then I end with, I will get back to you and find someone to help you with that. And just make sure you follow through. You want to give props when an idea is effective. Give credit where credit is due. If they provide you with a great suggestion, immediately provide them with praise and recognition for their feedback. You can provide praise and recognition by sending a text, making a phone call, or just tell them in person when you see them. When you provide praise and recognition for their input, this will make them feel more comfortable in opening up to you. Over time, this will increase treatment integrity because they are supporting the person served, implementing strategies that they gave input into. Number 3, demonstrate compassion and care. Of course, during the treatment planning process, we always want to focus on reducing the challenge of behavior of concern, right? But research illustrates that caregivers would rather work with a clinician that is warm and accepting than a clinician that can offer more effective process in almost all instances. And this is by Wright, 2022. So take time to avoid focusing on the content and give space for caregivers to talk and be heard. Number 4, avoid the blame game. Minimize utilizing context to address what the caregivers are not doing right. Utilizing the blame approach often results in caregivers shutting down and becoming resistant to the clinician's feedback. Remember, the caregiver is providing daily care and they are trying the best they can to support the individual. You have to think, that is with anyone. If you have someone who's constantly criticizing you and telling you what you're not doing right, over time, that person will become very aversive and to the point where you may engage in some avoidance behaviors, especially if you know they're coming around. The caregiver will feel the same way. So let's remember, as clinicians, we're there to make their job easier, not harder. Number 5, cultural differences. As clinicians, we work with all races and demographics. You must be aware of your personal bias and utilize an open mind when considering the caregiver's culture, perspective, and views. I have a personal experience that I'm not too proud of. I had an Asian American family I was assigned to as a BCBA. At the time, I was working with a young kiddo totally unaware of the Asian culture and sadly made no attempts to make myself aware. But I noticed the parents were not involved in the treatment planning process. The grandmother implemented the strategy. She always provided feedback and always was accessible and there during the parent trainings. The grandmother was extremely proactive and the parents were rarely present. The only time the parents were involved was when it came to signing paperwork. Sadly, due to my lack of education, I gave the parents a hard time since they were not present at the trainings. And let's just say they found another provider to work with and removed me from the case. But unbeknownst to me, in the Asian culture, the grandparents play an important role. In traditional Chinese culture, grandparents often care for their grandchildren, and grandchildren in turn are expected to respect and care for their grandparents when they grow up. If I had a time machine, One of the things I would have done differently was going to the case with an open mind, starting with practicing more cultural humility by accepting the grandmother's involvement and promoting collaboration with her instead. I should have provided more choices, which would have been more of me listening as opposed to me telling the family what to do. As clinicians, we should always consider the following. How can I practice cultural humility and responsiveness? With this case, am I engaging in perspective taking? Did I engage in self-reflection about my own personal bias and views? Am I utilizing a collaborative approach during my service delivery? A good resource is the article Cultural Humility in the Practice of Applied Behavior Analysis by Patricia Wright. The article distinguishes the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility. As clinicians, we should want to strive for cultural humility as opposed to competence. According to the article, competence is defined as the end goal of mastering the knowledge of other cultures, as opposed to cultural humility. If you review the online Merriam-Webster dictionary, humility is defined as freedom from pride or arrogance, or the quality of state of just being humble. We do not want to demonstrate arrogance by assuming we have mastered another culture. Instead, humble yourself and go into every case with an open mind and look at it as a teaching moment, a moment for us to learn and understand the needs of the person served and the individuals that support them. If you need a framework to help you identify how to move forward with illustrating cultural responsiveness, a great article published by Ballou and Jimenez Gomez titled Cultural Responsiveness and Applied Behavior Analysis provides great clinical recommendations. Here's a screenshot of a table from the article. Awareness, knowledge, and skills are emphasized as dimensions of culturally responsive behavior analytic services. So now we made it to the end of our slide, and here goes our last code. Our last code word is CAR, C-A-R. An example, I drive a blue car. Now wait, do not log out just yet. There's more information to share with you about how to receive your CEU and also get some one-on-one guidance for the strategies discussed in this video. So how do I get my CEU? You click the link below. Then from there, complete the brief questionnaire. Make sure you have those passcode answers. You pay the fee. And then from there, you get your CEU certificate within 1 to 2 weeks. Now, remember, if you want that data sheet that was presented in the slide, for $5, you can receive the Microsoft Word copy. Just when you complete the questionnaire, make sure you write in the comment section that you're interested in getting the sample data sheet. So do you need additional guidance based on the strategies discussed in today's event? Contact .T Mental Health Alliance to arrange further consultation. And we have a link below in the comment section. Thank you for joining .T Mental Health Alliance. So if you want to get in contact with us, our phone number is 856-440-3190. We also have our email, Dottie's Consultation Services at gmail.com, and services is spelled SRVCS. And you can also follow us on Facebook. That way you can stay in the loop and receive more content and resources. Our Facebook name is DOTTMHA, or you can just look up .T Mental Health Alliance. Thank you for choosing .T Mental Health Alliance for obtaining your CEU. Our mission is to help you succeed by working together and identifying ways to create a learning environment for change.